We've been in a journey, a connection through the last few days of Jesus' life on earth. And in doing so, we've seen some of the places that he's gone. But today, what we really want to do is kind of just strip everything back and sit at the foot of the cross. And if it goes well, we're probably going to leave here a little broken today. But I think that's how we enter in. The end of Matthew chapter 27, we see that there are some ladies that have been following Jesus from a distance. And so today we put ourselves in the posture of those ladies, following in the crowd, but at a distance. And so let's set the stage about where we've been. His first stop was at the table, gathered together with his disciples in the upper room. There sitting at the table was Judas Iscariot, one of his trusted 12 that had already agreed to betray him. And even with Judas there sitting at the table, Jesus takes what they'd already celebrated in the Passover, the Passovering of death, the blessing and the grace of God, invited his disciples to taste of his sacrifice and his grace. And they get up from the table and they make their way to the garden. And in the garden, Jesus asks his disciples to stand guard as he goes and he pours out his heart before his Father, God. And in doing so, he utters these words, "If it's at all possible that this cup be taken from me, that I don't have to go through all of this, would you take it away?" And in a moment of surrender, Jesus says, "Yet not my will, but yours be done." And after the prayer, he's given a kiss of betrayal. Disciples scatter. The people that should be right there with Jesus have taken off. And he knew it was going to happen. He knew it was going to happen. Even Peter, who stood up so boldly, turned away. And he's arrested and led off to court. Well, kind of court. Right? He goes to the house of the high priest, and there the Jewish council is gathered together, and they're just looking for a way to convict Jesus. And so as they're gathered together, they already know what the outcome is going to be. They just need the evidence to get them there. So false witnesses, false testimonies, they just keep pouring in. And we're kind of left going, am I going to stand up for Jesus? Or am I kind of tuck tail and run, hide in the background? And it's the next day they actually go to the court and they enter in the guilty verdict, guilty of equating himself with God, Son of God. Blasphemy is the charge. That comes with a consequence of death. But the Jewish council couldn't give death sentences. They were under the control of the Roman authorities, and so they had to go to the Roman courts, to the Roman governor. And there before Pilate, they bring him in, and he's like, what am I supposed to do with this guy? Well, we have found him guilty of blasphemy. They don't just say that, though. They start equating him with the king of Rome, the emperor. He says he's a king. He's inciting people to go against you, not to pay their taxes. Treason. Pilate really wants nothing to do with this. Right? He's tried figuratively to wash his hands of the whole deal. It's kind of went back and forth. Other gospel accounts tell us it sent him to Herod to the north, and Herod didn't want to do anything. Sent him back to Pilate, and Pilate's trying to figure things out, and his wife is whispering in his ear things not to do because of a dream that she had, and he's just dealing with it. And this is where we enter into today. Bystanders on the scene. First at the court. Pilate wanted nothing to do with this lightning rod political issue that was Jesus. And as the crowd got louder, he was afraid of a riot. And so he didn't want to push too hard. He didn't want to put his foot down too much. History tells us he had also gotten some flack from the Roman emperor about being too harsh. But he's got another out. He's got another out because the Roman government has allowed the Jewish people to set a prisoner free, a prisoner of their choice. And so he brings up Jesus and a man by the name of Barabbas. And the choice is theirs. Who do you want me to release? Jesus or Barabbas? What do we know about Barabbas? Matthew tells us he's notorious. He's well known for being bad. Mark tells us he's been part of the uprising. He was leading a rebellion. And in the process, he took life. He was a murderer. Who do you want me to release to you? The murderer or Jesus, who you call the Christ, the King, the Son of God? And the people shouted back, Barabbas, release Barabbas. Jesus was rejected by the very people he came for. And that means you, sitting in the crowd, have rejected Jesus. And you have chanted for the release of Barabbas. And Pilate says to the people, then what shall I do with this Jesus who you call the Christ? And the crowd yells back, crucify him. Over and over. Because Pilate's really trying not to get caught up in this thing. So he washes his hands and he says, very well then, his blood be on your hands. As if that worked. So he was rejected, but he was also mocked. Matthew tells us that he was whipped. A cat of nine tails would have been leather straps, pieces of glass, rock, things that would have been sharp or hard, that would have bruised and ripped the skin. He was whipped. He was beaten. This was before a group called a battalion, about 480 soldiers. He was stripped naked. His clothes removed. In place of those, they put on him a scarlet robe, because that was the robe a king would wear. And they made for him a crown. But not just any crown. They took thorns and twisted them together, pushed them down on his head. They took a reed, a stick, and they handed it to him as his scepter. And then they began to bow down before him. Not in sincerity, but mocking him. Hail, King of the Jews, is what they said. Well, they took the scepter, the reed stick, and they beat him over the head and they spat on him. Took off the royal clothes and gave him his own back. And they led him away to be crucified. He was beat so badly he couldn't even carry the crossbeam of the cross to the place of his death. They encountered a man by the name of Simon who would carry that cross for him. He was thirsty, so they offered him wine mixed with gall. It was meant to take the pain away. Jesus tasted it, but then declined to drink of that wine. He wanted to be alert in the scenario. They get to the place called Golgotha, which means skull. Some would say that the rocks in that area kind of looked like a skull. They probably would have laid down the cross and tied Jesus to that cross before they took large nails and drove them into his hands and into his feet. They already had a hole dug in the ground, and they would pick up the cross with him on it and shove it into the ground. I'm guessing there would have been just a jerking motion to that. Some say the cross even leaned forward a little bit, so you'd have to bear the weight even more so. All of that weight pressing down upon him, internally filling his lungs with fluid, and the pain that he would have had to come up for air, pulling against his hands. 4 guards are gathered around him now. They've been doing the execution. They've taken his clothing, divided among themselves. But when they get to his tunic, his undergarment, they realize it's a really fine piece of material, all one piece. And so they cast lots. They basically draw straws for who gets the nicest piece of clothing, which fulfills a prophecy found in Psalm 22. They again ridicule him, put a sign over his head. Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. Again, derogatory. Just mocking him. Two thieves, one on either side, are there with him. They too offer insults at him. Another gospel account tells us actually it was just one of them. The other one, even though he was guilty and he was hanging there with, acknowledged that Jesus would be the Son of God. The guards are continuing to hammer down. The bystanders have caught in on this. They're throwing his words back at his face. The same words that were uttered at his trial, where he said, I will destroy the temple and 3 days later will rise again. So where are you, Jesus? You said you were going to do this. Go save yourself. You're going to rebuild the temple and you can't even save yourself? The religious leaders, they start uttering things like, he saved others, but he can't even save himself. If he is the king, he should get down himself. He trusts in God. Let's see if God saves him from this. And mocked and ridiculed, and there we are in the crowd watching it all. More than watching. Maybe we've even joined in the mocking and the ridicule and the rejection of Jesus. And he's forsaken. It's noon. Noon on Friday, and the sky goes dark. I've done a lot of funeral services, and it seems like weather just seems to tank around burials. And yet there he is, hanging on the cross. It's dark across the land. 3 o'clock, it's still dark. Jesus cries out from his cross, my God, why have you forsaken me? Not a doubt in God, but the weight of the burden of sin upon his shoulders. The sins of you and I. And it says he breathed his last. We can read on in other gospel accounts. Jesus actually said the words, it is finished. It is finished. What's finished? Is it him? Is it hope? Is hope finished? I got to think, as one of the believers, you have seen Jesus do the impossible. Demon-possessed people have been set free. People battling severe illness have been restored. You maybe were sitting along the banks when Jesus taught, and fed over 5,000 people with 5 loaves and 2 fish. Maybe you heard the stories of how he went to a grave and called his friend Lazarus to come out. And yet in these last few days, your hope has been plummeting. Because Jesus, who you've called the Christ, the Son of God, is losing his life. The one who you thought was going to save you has been bound up, mocked, and is hanging on a cross before you. It says he yielded his spirit. He gave it up freely. Another passage would say, into your hands I commit my spirit. He gave up his life into the hands of God. He trusted God. It says immediately the temple curtain was torn. The earth began to shake. Rocks were split. Matthew kind of lumps together something there that happens with the resurrection, and we'll come back to that. But in that moment, we're brought into the story in a different area. You see, the people who were present would have known that inside of the temple, or old school, inside of the tabernacle, was the most holy place. It was kind of like a bullseye, like you just kind of kept getting closer to the presence of God. And the most holy place was only entered in one time a year by the high priest. He would offer a sacrifice on behalf of the sins of all the people. And it says in Hebrews chapter 10 that temple curtain was torn, right? Giving us the opportunity to enter into the presence of God through a new and living way. Because Jesus' sacrifice was once for all time. That Jesus is the great high priest. Jesus is the atoning sacrifice. So that temple curtain, I've heard it's about 4 inches thick. Ripped not from the bottom to the top like a man would do, but from the top to the bottom like God would do. Allowing us to enter into his presence. It is finished. The law of sin and death, the law given to Moses, the do's and the do-nots, expecting us to be perfect to enter into the presence of God, was nailed to the cross. Perfection nailed in our place. It is finished. And freely he gave himself up. And so where are we in the story? The whole journey through, we've been writing ourselves into the story. What chair am I sitting in at the table? Is it quite possible that I'm in the seat of betrayal? That something about my words or my actions has actually betrayed my trust in Jesus. And yet, at the table, he offers forgiveness. He is the Passover lamb. It's through his blood that we're healed. In the garden, the kiss of betrayal, the promise of denial, the backstepping, the falling away of the disciples. In the courtroom, accusing Jesus. Maybe in the seat of Pilate himself, left with this dilemma of what will I do with Jesus who is called the Christ? Will I crucify him or set him free? And you and I are left with that question here today. What will we do with Jesus? Doesn't matter if you've been a Christian all your life or you're coming to church for the very first time. First time you've heard the message. You are left today with this dilemma. What will I do with Jesus, who is called the King, the Savior, the Son of God? Will I believe in him or will I deny him? Will I follow him or retreat? Will I reject him or mock him? How do we mock him? The most prominent way we mock Jesus today is we profess to be Christians, but we don't live like it. We say we follow Jesus, but we don't. We want him to save us, but we don't want to live for him. Is Jesus our King? That man who was on trial there with Jesus, his name was Barabbas. To understand the terminology, Bar means son. Simon Bar Jonah, Simon son of Jonah. Bar. Abba, father. Daddy. He's the son of a daddy. He's a daddy's boy. You and I are Barabbas. You and I are the Son of God, but we're actively living in rebellion to the will of God. And you and I are on trial for our murder, for the hate, for the disrespect, for the rejecting, for the mocking, for the denial. And it's in that moment that Jesus takes our punishment, and you and I who are guilty are set free. You and I, sons and daughters of God himself, are set free by the true Son of God, Jesus Christ. It is finished, and he breathes his last. Today we sit in this position, and we get ready to come into a time of communion. Now I know that church, for many of us, can become just something that we do. And we can go through the motions. And we get through the hour, hour and a half, and we go grab lunch, and we've moved on with our day. We can come to the table, and we can remember Jesus, but it's just sometimes a going through the motions. And today I don't want it to be that. Today I want us to sit at the foot of the cross and take it in. So if you close your eyes for a moment. You're in the crowd. Jesus has been rejected by the crowd. The chants of crucify him are ringing loud. You're in the crowd. Jesus has been stripped naked, beaten, mocked, spat upon. You're in the crowd. Jesus has been given the beam by which he must die on, and he's led out of the city. He falls under its weight, and they call another to carry the cross. He's given a chance to numb the pain, but he refuses it. He's led to the place called the skull, tied to the cross, nails driven into his body, excruciating pain. He's hanging on the cross. Darkness covers the land. But darkness has also begun to cover your heart, because it seems as though hope is fading. Your king is dying, and you don't know what to do. Jesus utters the words, "It is finished." Your head falls. The tears flow. It is finished.